Let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am Allison Manley. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Canopy Studios. Canopy designs, builds, and supports websites for clients who want to make a positive impact. And particularly, we love to build sustainable sites that last for a very long time. So today's webinar is about just that. It's about how to make your site last for 5 years and possibly more. And a bit about Anne Stefanyk, as founder and CEO of Canopy Studios. Anne helps create clarity around project needs and turns client conversations into actionable outcomes. She really enjoys helping clients identify their issues with their sites and then empowering the Canopy team to execute really great solutions. You're all likely very familiar with Zoom these days in these times of quarantine, but a reminder that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, please enter it there. And when Anne has done her presentation, we will address all the questions at one time. So from there, I will turn off my video and turn it over to Anne.
Okay, wonderful. Again, lovely to see some familiar names and some new names in our participants chat. And I'm looking forward to talk today about how to make your site last for 5 years or possibly more. We believe your website should last you 10 years. That's right, I said 10 years. And today we're going to talk about how to do this. So again, thank you, Allison, for the introduction. Again, my name is Anne Stefanyk. I'm founder and CEO of Canopy, and I love making websites and technology easy to understand and effective. I've been working in the web since 2006. And like Allison said, at Canopy, we specialize in taking care of the whole life cycle of the website, which means that of course we do brand new projects, but our specialty is in support. We're really good at taking over somebody else's code and making the site really better. So let's dive in. First off, as you folks may or may not know, we have a winter series. And Allison, if you wouldn't mind posting the link in the chat so people can sign up if you haven't already, but we'll cover a variety of topics. Today, we're going to speak a little bit about the philosophy of Kaizen, continuous website improvement, signals that lead to change, and some must-dos. Okay, so I wanted to start off this presentation about talking to two items. First off, at Canopy, we focus on continuous improvement, or Kaizen. Kaizen is the Sino-Japanese word for improvement. And Kaizen is a concept referring to that all activities are working to continuously improve all functions of the business and involve all the employees from the CEOs to the developers. This is the way I run my business and the lens to which we support our client sites. The second item, and you may recognize this guy, is an understanding that your website is an infinite game. You've perhaps heard of the book, Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, and he points out that running an organization is a journey without a final destination. This book distinguishes between two types of games, finite and infinite. And in finite games like football or chess, the players are known, the rules are fixed, there's an agreed upon objective that often ends with a winner being declared. In the infinite games, on the other hand, they can be played by known and unknown players. There's no exact rules or length of the game because the game is infinite. There's no winning. The objective is simply to continue playing the game. So this is how I run my business, and again, how we approach client websites. I love this quote. When you embrace an infinite mindset, you will eventually build stronger, more innovative, and more inspiring solutions with resilience to thrive in an ever-changing world. And that's why we believe in what we call continuous website improvement. As we say, your website is never done. What I always say is the first day your website launches is the first day of your project. This is why at Canopy, we have 2/3 of our business in support, and which we really call continuous website improvement. Because remember, your website is that infinite game. And that's why it's skillful to make continuous improvements along the way to make your site last for the long term. Okay. So what we do is in practicing continuous website improvement, it's like a flywheel. Once you start it, it gets moving faster and faster. So when we adopt people into our program, regardless of where you are in your website's lifecycle, whether it's a brand new build or into support, we start with strategy. We create informed, actionable plans that are focused on what we call KPIs or key performance indicators. And then we implement. We implement the most impactful features quickly. And most importantly, then we learn and iterate. We're going to break these down on how you can take these into your organization. So first off, we always start with strategy. We always do this when we have a new client and then usually annually. I recommend you do the same. We say small bites for big wins here at Canopy, and we like to take that first small bite and strategy. We often call these website growth plans, which a website growth plan is simply a plan where we focus on one problem and solve it. I always like to say pick one thing you want to focus on, and then that will help you obtain measurable results. It could be looking at your information architecture, the navigation, overall site usability, or it could be for design purposes such as launching a new brand or content strategy. It could also just be fixing your accessibility. All sites really need to be AA compliant, and you could tackle that. Or maybe the site is really slow. The intention here is pick one problem and focus on the solution. Then we implement. So this is where we start with those, again, small bites for big wins. We encouraging building out the plan so you organize your work in 2-week sprints. This is how we organize everything at Canopy, from marketing and sales, but most importantly, the implementation of client projects. And what I mean by small bites for big wins is let's take something small, achieve it really well, measure it, and then move on. And remember, less is more. I see so many clients doing these huge monolithic builds, and essentially they're trying to solve all the problems at once. So we like to do something called a minimum lovable product, which you might have heard the software term minimum viable product, and we just thought that was a little icky. So in this way, we thought, what's the least we can get away with that we love the most? And finally, remember to stay nimble. It's so important to take and implement, but sometimes things happen, like a pandemic hits and you need to pivot quite quickly. So learning and improving. So this is what leads us to the next phase. And this is where you've got to keep the finger on the pulse of your organization and know that your website will always evolve. This is what we call support. And what we always like to start with is making sure that we benchmark so we can share wins and successes. We like to work together so in the first 45 days, everybody feels tangible results, and we need to start upfront by defining what those are, which means we have to measure regularly. It's so important to measure what matters by starting with the question, what do we want to know, and then measure that. We often find that helping clients measure stuff, we really realize that some of their data is really dirty. So maybe that first plan is putting in some of the right markers and trackers so that you can really measure what your conversions are, what's your time on the page, anything that really makes sure that your organization is moving forward. You also want to schedule regular user testing. It's so important that you're creating a human-centric design, and there's lots of little ways to do that, and we'll talk about that later. And finally, you also want to be able to create time for integrating feedback. So what happens is usually that we'll do a bunch of work 3/4 of the year, and then other things will come up, and maybe that last quarter of the year is integrating a bunch of small fixes. So that's how we continuously improve your website. If you think about your website like a house, you would never just build your house and never do anything again. If you want your house to last 100 years, you're probably going to need to, redo the roof, replace the dishwasher, and you might even need to renovate the bathroom once or twice so it doesn't look so dated. Same with your website. You want to continually nurture your site. So how do you know when it's time for change? You might be feeling, oh goodness, where do I even start? So start with looking for signals when it's time to do something with your site, because your website is more vital than ever. Your customers are making decisions and performing perceptions before they even act. And your website is such a vital part of your success, it's no longer optional to have a bad website. So let's look for some of these. First off, I think with COVID, each and every one of us has been forced that we have to evolve. I honestly vowed to never use the word pivot again after 2020, but the reality is that many things have had to pivot, and it's always usually focused to a more online version. So that's a good signal that it's time to do some work. Another round is around your industry. There might be new changes, new disruptors. Maybe your industry is involved. Like, for example, the whole teaching economy has now opened up this new pathway of online learning. And I believe that space is going to blow up in a really good way. We're going to really revolutionize the way we teach people and learn. Another signal is just asking your users, are they actually able to find what they're looking for? Do you ask or do you test? You also want to see, have their needs changed? For example, all events are now digital, and a lot of people are facing Zoom fatigue and Zoom burnout. So, how can we then create a more engaging, inclusive, interactive event that gets people, really engaged with your brand and leaving a great impression? You may also have a brand new set of users. There's a whole bunch of people that have never used Zoom or online tools before. And now in the pandemic, everybody's becoming a Zoom pro. But there's ways to touch this on your website. Often this is done by content. Content is an area that so many people just kind of set it and forget it. But the reality is you can't let your content go stale. You need to be able to make sure that you've effectively presented your content to your users and you've positioned them as the hero. What about your conversion rates? This is often a key indicator that it's time to do something with your website. Whether your visitors' expectations are increasing, if your website's not improving, conversion rates will naturally start to decline. And what about Google? Google is always throwing us curveballs. So, unless you are actively promoting and changing up your website, you potentially could lose in search engine rankings. Google actually doesn't even want you to leave Google anymore. So, you know how you're Googling for recipes now and they all kind of come up at the top, or you're looking for a carpet cleaning service and all of the stuff is right there on Google? That means that it's time to make sure your website has structured data so it appears on those top engine search results. And what are your competitors doing? Do you have new competitors? Have they recently reimagined their website? These are all really good signals that it's time for change. And what about speed? If your site isn't loading fast, you are getting attrition. So it's a well-known statistic that 53% of your visitors will abandon your website if it takes more than 3% to load, and 75% of those will not come back if it takes more than 4 seconds to load. So performance is so imperative and maybe one of those key things you fix first. Another thing is we see in the web world, a lot of design trends are overused. Parallax, carousels, animations, infographics, do they really matter? What really matters is the user. And in order to make a site work, we want to make sure that the content, usability, design, and technical pieces all work together. Fads or trends will be just that, they'll come and go. But if you focus on creating a human-centric design, your site will always be on trend. What about mobile? And mobile isn't just stacking things. Mobile is about having a stellar experience while they're on mobile. They probably have different needs while they're on the go versus on the desktop. So understanding the users, it's really important to place things in the right position. So there's lots of different websites that just simply stack. And if you have just simply stacked all your content, that's probably a good signal that it's time to think consciously about the mobile user journey. And what about, is it just easy to use and edit? You folks have a content management system. And in this day and age, content management systems should be easy to use, fast, and super easy to create new content. So often I hear people come into our support program that they say, I just can't edit my stuff. Or whenever I edit something, I get kind of that white screen of death. This happens. So know that sometimes one of the key things that's an indicator that you need to clean up your site is do the back end work so people can edit and manage their content more skillfully. Okay, so let's talk about some must-dos for your website. So here's the ways that you can extend the life of your website. First off, I'm a big fan of constantly looking at your content. You want to assess, refresh, retire, or redirect content. Not all content on your site is going to serve the purpose that it has at the beginning forever. You want to take stock of your underperforming content and functionality and really repurpose it for today's needs. Then you can retire or archive key sections and redirect the old content to new, keeping your link equity for SEO. I always say that the hardest part for most of our clients is content. So when we sit down and do strategy, we often do a full inventory of all the content, define their user journey, and the different states of mind they're going to be engaging with you along their journey. Even before you think of rebuilding your website, it's probably skillful to look at your content. You also want to measure what matters. Like I said, many of our clients that come to us don't have a lot of indicators for data. So it might be putting together a more comprehensive Google Analytics plan, and then making sure that you have the right leading indicators. For example, if you drop in the search engine rankings, you will have lower conversions. And if your site is slow, you will drop even further in rankings. And if you don't have a well optimized mobile version, you will drop further in rankings. So the drop in rankings is actually a lagging indicator. Some of the leading indicators are performance, mobile optimization, and overall content strategy. These are things that you can measure and then make sure that you make improvements so that you increase in your search engine rankings. You also want to be, I'm a big fan of calling human centric, and you really want to be avoiding trending. So, for example, am I following a trend that'll look dated in a year or two, or am I refreshing a style that will stand the test of time? So, for example, everybody was into these carousels. Everybody wanted to use carousels. But the reality is the end user, when they visit your website, if they see a carousel and they haven't had any other experience with their brand, they believe the content that's presented in the carousel is presenting what they do. So if you're talking just about one facet of your business, or you're just talking about, an event that's going on, so often users get confused by what's in that carousel and they often only see the first one. So ditch the carousel and create a really strong positioning statement in that hero area. You also want to be accessible. This is no longer an option. You don't have to be AAA accessibility level, but there's so many things that you can do here. We can provide a couple of tools, but the basic one is making sure that you use the proper use of the heading tags in your WYSIWYG, which stands for what you see is what you get. And it's that little box in your content management system. You simply, instead of creating a bold, large text title, you actually want to use the proper heading so screen readers can read it. You also want to name your images appropriately. So instead of saying 7123.jpg, you may say mother and child riding a bus. There's lots of ways that you can make your site more accessible with color contrast, font sizes, and using the proper technology to make sure that a screen reader can quickly and easily access your website. Remember, we all get a little bit more disabled with age, and we want to make sure that your website is inclusive for all, which often is also things like adding closed captions to your videos. So if somebody is, on the bus, handful of groceries, they can still watch your videos by looking at the captions. And be serious about your security. It's so important that you do your updates as soon as they come out. You want to host with a reputable provider. It is way more expensive and way more painful to unhack your site versus constantly making sure the windows and doors are locked. Some of your module and plugin updates you can actually do quarterly versus as they come out, as long as they don't have a security requirement, but you never want to leave those too far behind. And if you're trying to do your updates and your site breaks, that's a good sign that you probably have some custom code that needs to be changed out. I cannot stress enough how important it is to listen to your users. The more you know is the more you could do. Thanks to continuous conversations with our clients, we're able to more quickly and easily respond to their needs. So make sure you create space to connect with your folks. That might be talking to your customer service folks and learning what they've heard, or doing regular surveys or interviews. You want to also speak to folks that are kind of new to your organization, as well as people that have been there for a long time. This helps you really drive conversations with executive leaders or management about changes you want on the website. Data makes a big difference. So let's get back to the philosophy of small bites for big wins. Here's some low-hanging fruit that you can make for some immediate impact on your website. So first off, look at your navigation. When you do, if you look at Google Analytics, or perhaps you install a tool like Hotjar that allows for heat mapping, you're going to see where people click, where they don't click, and you'll be able to update your navigation. Pretty much you could remove those links that people click on the least, or surface links that people are having a harder time finding. Another thing that you could do is simply tweak and change up the color palette. There's ways that you can create a lot of impact by simply elevating the colors and the pictures on your site. This is all very content manager friendly. You may need a developer to change the CSS in the site, but you can go ahead and update your content and your images with a lot of ease. And of course, You also, again, reimagining that content. It's so important that we start with inclusivity in our words, and we're looking at ways to be able to, add new images or create new elements on the site, or even adding video. Video is a great way to tell stories. So make sure that when you're doing your videos, you're creating a sense of a story. Okay. And also, another great way is you can focus on key sections of the site. For example, you may want to just tackle the homepage versus a whole website redesign, and just make sure that you have a better user experience when people land there. Or perhaps it's key landing pages. Maybe you've been driving folks to a new type of event because it's all virtual and you need to provide different content. So if you can tackle one piece of the website at a time, you're really going to be able to create big wins with just those small bites. All right, everybody, if you want help with this or anything else, feel free to reach out to me. That QR code will get you right to my LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. You can find me on Twitter, but I might not reply so quickly. So LinkedIn is the best place to get me. Okay. And know that we provide these what called website growth plans, which are those small bites of strategy that we can either create for you that you can self-implement or work with us. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for some questions.
All right, if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A down at the bottom. I have one for you, Anne, just that I think would be helpful for everybody. So when you have a small team of 1 or 3 people, not all marketing teams are massive and have lots of staff. If you're a smaller team, how do you best prioritize which work to do first?
Well, I would say look at what is really driving that bottom line. So if you're a small team and you know that you need to get a certain number of applicants to your website for a program, that is going to be the number one driver. And it may be looking at the first one is just saying, okay, we need to be able to actually measure how many people visit our site and then how many people convert into that. And you can say, okay, we're not having the conversions. What can we do that? Okay, let's look at some of the basics. I always say performance. That's a very quick one. You can go to Google Page Speed, pop in your website, press submit, and it's going to give you a list of things that you can change. Just getting your website to load faster is going to increase those conversions.
Okay, great. And then similarly, how do you best budget your time and your money to pace out the work?
That's a great question. And I do believe that you want to create, a lot of clients come to us and they say, okay, we've got this build budget. And then I say, well, what are you going to do for support? And they're like, support? We're just going to do very basic. And I think, well, if your website project is 6 months and then we launch it, you have another 9.5 years of life in this website. So you need to actually plan to love and nurture it. So what I always say is if you only get a little, that's great. If you can get a little more, that's fantastic. But I often find that if you're in a situation, you want to kind of plan for either an hour a week, 2 hours a week, and just put it in your calendar so that you're constantly working on the site on a regular cadence. And it might mean that if you don't have a robust support budget out of the gate, what you need to do then is come up with like 1 or 2 small wins that you can tackle over the first like 3 to 6 months after your site goes live, and then show the impact to the executives on your team so they start looking at the website as an investment versus a cost center. So I think that's one of the biggest switches in mindset is getting people to see that the website isn't just as a cost center, it's actually an investment in bettering your business or your organization.
Right. And if you pace it out slowly and you do maintenance slowly, it's like taking care of your house or your car, right? You don't build it all up so that they're very expensive fixes to do later, but you're doing a little bit at a time.
Exactly.
Great. Does anyone else, any attendees have any questions? Feel free to pop them in the Q&A or in the chat. And if not, we'll just call it an early day.
Yeah. So
All
I
right,
know
great.
that
Oh,
support is something that I often say with those air quotes, because so many people think that support is just doing your plugin updates or your module updates, but really it is that focusing on that continuous improvement of the site. And it is so fantastic to watch our clients once they launch and go live, and then we learn so much. Like, for example, when I launched my agency, the very first thing that happened, I was like, we're doing Drupal. Okay, got my website out. We got Drupal. The first 3 inquiries I had was, do you do WordPress? I thought, oh my goodness. I turned to Shane, my one employee at the time. I said, Shane, do you do WordPress? He's like, yes, I know WordPress really well. I said, great, let's listen to the market and provide WordPress. And out of the gate, we became a Drupal and WordPress support provider and build company. And we still do lots of WordPress and Drupal to this day. But if I hadn't actually listened to the market, I would have missed out on a huge opportunity for different revenue streams, different talent pools, just an overall different market. So if you listen to what your users say and help be responsive to them, I find that really creates a large lasting impact on your website.
Truth.
Hey.
Great. Well, thank you very
Oh,
much. Oh, we do have a question from Nancy. What kind of measurements do you use for a government agency in respect to the bottom line?
great question. So I often find it is figuring out what is the, like, if there's a lot of people that used to fill out download PDF forms and then email those to you, perhaps you can change those to online forms to be able to service your users better. Sometimes it's time on page. So if before they were spending, 15 seconds on the page, they're now spending 30 seconds on the page. It means they're going through the information and digesting it a little faster and easier. So I know that like government, higher ed, nonprofits aren't always driven by like conversions, and but we do figure out what is the things that, is it the number of clients, the number of inquiries to on the telephone, do we have, 10 a day, and maybe that'll go down to 5 a day because the website is more easily self-serving users on the website. So it's kind of thinking about what kinds of ways in our organization that's going to reduce friction for people to engage with us.
Great. Thank you. And thank you,
Great
Nancy.
question.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we are almost at time. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We will send out a recording and a deck of the webinar probably by end of day tomorrow, so end of this week. And of course, a reminder that Canopy would love to help you with your website if you need it. There is a list of resources there that Anne is showing will be at the back of the deck. Have a spectacular rest of your week. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for
Bye, everybody.
coming. Have a great day.